I had always believed I knew my wife, Sarah. After 12 years of marriage, I thought I understood every nuance of her personality. The way her eyes flickered when she was deep in thought, the way she hummed under her breath when she was happy, the way she could turn even the most ordinary day into something special. But as they say, you never truly know someone until they reveal their darkest side. Sarah wasn't perfect. None of us are, but she had an undeniable charm that made imperfections feel like part of the magic. Her laughter had a way of filling a space, wrapping around you like sunlight spilling through a window. She was a dreamer, always chasing something bigger, something just beyond her reach. Her ambitions were boundless, sometimes reckless, but always contagious. She could make you believe in the impossible, convince you that life was meant to be lived in grand, sweeping gestures. And I had loved that about her, until the moment I realized just how dangerous those grand gestures could be. It started with the debt, or rather, it had started long before that. I had just been too blind to see it. Sarah never said a word, and I never thought to ask. We had a home, a son we adored, and what I had assumed was a stable life together. I had always been the careful one, the planner, the one who kept track of bills and savings, who made sure we had enough tucked away for Noah's future, for emergencies, for a life built on steady ground. But stability, as I learned, was just an illusion. Sarah had always lived in the moment, with a fierce determination that left little room for hesitation. She chased her dreams the way some people chase the last rays of sunlight before night fell, desperately, as if stopping meant losing something forever. And I admired that. I truly did. But admiration turned to disbelief when I discovered that her latest dream had cost $20,000, a price she never told me about, a decision she made alone, a secret she kept until it was too late. She hadn't asked. She hadn't even hinted. Instead, she had gone behind my back, taken out a loan in both our names, and left me standing in the aftermath. And then, one morning, she was gone. I woke up to an empty bed. At first, I thought she had woken up early, maybe gone to the kitchen to make coffee, maybe out for a morning walk like she sometimes did when she needed to clear her head. But something fell off. The air in the house was still, too still. A kind of quiet that didn't just mean absence. It meant something had been taken away. I called her name, my voice breaking the silence, but there was no answer. That was when I saw it, the note on the kitchen table. Just a single piece of paper, but it may as well have been a bomb waiting to go off. Her handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if she had written it in a hurry, or with shaking hands. My eyes scanned the words, but one sentence stood out, searing itself into my brain. I need to follow my heart. For a long moment, I just stared at the words. My mind refused to process them, as if rejecting the reality they represented. Follow her heart. To where? To what? And then, absurdly, I almost laughed, because it sounded like something out of a bad romance novel, one of those stories where the protagonist makes a dramatic exit to chase a grand adventure. Except in those stories, the hero doesn't wake up to a mountain of debt and a shattered family. In those stories, people don't just walk out on their husbands and children, leaving behind nothing but a few hastily scribbled words. I imagined her somewhere far away, sipping margaritas under the sun, or running toward some dream that had never included me. Meanwhile, I was here, standing in our kitchen, staring at a note that had just detonated my entire life. But the worst part wasn't the debt. It wasn't even the betrayal. The worst part was Noah. How do you tell your 10-year-old son that his mother has left? That she has walked away, not just from me, but from him? At first, I told myself I'd shield him from the truth for as long as possible, that I'd protect him from the weight of it, at least for a little while. But Noah was always too smart for his own good. He had this quiet way of observing the world, of seeing through the things people tried to hide. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He stood in the doorway, his small frame seeming even smaller in the dim morning light. He looked at me, his face a mixture of confusion and something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face. "Dad." His voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you okay?" And for the first time in my life, I didn't know how to answer that question. I wanted to lie, to tell him everything was fine, that his mother would be back soon, that this was all just a misunderstanding, that one day we'd look back on this and laugh. But even at 10 years old, Noah wasn't someone you could fool. He would see through it in an instant. So I forced a smile, one that felt brittle, fragile, like it might shatter if I wasn't careful. "Mom needs some time away," I said. "She's dealing with a lot right now." Noah's eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for something: doubt, truth, reassurance. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I thought he might push, might demand more answers, but instead he just nodded. "Okay," he murmured. Then, after a beat, he added, "Let me know if you need help." Those 6 words crushed me more than Sarah's note ever could. He was 10. He should have been worrying about soccer practice, about school, about whether he could stay up late to watch his favorite show. Not about whether his father could hold it together. The house felt unbearably empty without Sarah. It wasn't just her absence. It was the void she left behind. She had always filled the spaces, even when she wasn't trying. Now, those spaces felt like wounds, open and raw, stretching into every corner. I stood at the kitchen window, her note clenched in my hand, the words repeating over and over in my mind. I tried to piece it all together, to make sense of the choices she had made, to understand how we had ended up here. Had I missed the signs? The late nights, the distant glances, the tension that had crept into our conversations? Had I been blind to the truth all along? Noah was the only thing anchoring me to reality. No matter how much Sarah's betrayal stung, no matter how deep the fractures ran, he was my priority. More than the debt, more than the broken trust. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. A silent vow formed in my mind. I wouldn't let her choices define our future. But vows are easier made than kept. Sarah's departure had left cracks in our lives, and those cracks were spreading faster than I could repair them. I wondered if she had ever truly understood the gravity of what she was leaving behind. Not just me, but Noah. Did she care whether we would be okay without her? I would never know. Standing there, watching the world continue outside the window, as if nothing had changed, one truth became painfully clear. Sarah had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. Even as the weight of the situation pressed down on me, Noah stood beside me, offering his quiet support in a way that caught me off guard. It was almost ironic. He was a child, yet in that moment, he carried himself with a strength and steadiness I didn't have. It felt as though our roles had reversed, like he had stepped into the shoes of an adult, while I was left reeling, trying to make sense of everything. The rest of the day passed in a blur, each task becoming nothing more than a way to distract myself from the unbearable silence that had settled over the house. I scrubbed the kitchen counter longer than necessary, rearranged the bookshelves even though they were already in order, and even paid bills, hoping that the routine would give me some sense of normalcy. But no matter what I did, reminders of Sarah were everywhere. A coffee cup she had left sitting on the counter, a scarf draped over the chair, carrying the faintest trace of her perfume. Each object whispered her absence, making it impossible to forget. By the time evening arrived, I was utterly drained. I sat at the dining table, staring at a stack of unopened mail, unable to summon the energy to sort through them. That was when Noah walked in, carrying a plate of peanut butter sandwiches. Without a word, he placed it in front of me and slid it across the table. "Dinner," he said simply, as if sensing I wouldn't have made anything for myself. I mumbled a quiet thank you and picked up a sandwich, taking a bite not out of hunger, but out of obligation. The food tasted like nothing. My mind was too occupied, too exhausted to register anything beyond the ache that had settled deep in my chest. Then came the question I had been dreading all day. Is Mom coming back? I froze. My grip tightened around the sandwich as I processed his words. How do you answer a question like that? Do you lie to protect him? Do you offer false hope? Do you soften the truth, hoping to spare his feelings? Or do you tell him everything, no matter how painful it may be? I lifted my gaze and met his, searching for the right words. No matter what happens, Noah, we'll be okay. He held my stare for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then slowly he nodded. He accepted my answer, even if it wasn't the one he had hoped for. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Sarah had left a void, one that would take time to heal. But Noah and I still had each other. We weren't alone in this. Together, we would figure out a way to move forward. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring into the darkness. The silence was suffocating, amplifying every thought that raced through my mind. The debt, the betrayal, the uncertainty of what came next, it all pressed down on me like a crushing weight. My thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. But through all of it, one thing remained clear. Noah, he was the one thing keeping me anchored. He was a reason I couldn't afford to fall apart. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for him. He needed me to be the father he could rely on, the one who wouldn't let this break us. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. No more wallowing. No more letting this consume me. One step at a time, I would rebuild what Sarah had tried to destroy. The next morning, I told Noah my plan. His response was simple, just a quiet, okay, followed by a small nod. But that nod meant everything. It meant he believed in me. It meant we were in this together. And in that moment, my resolve hardened. Later that day, as we sat down to discuss our next steps, I was taken aback by how sharp and perceptive Noah was. His young mind processed the situation with a clarity I hadn't expected. I laid out the first step, freezing the loan account before Sarah could do any more damage. But as I explained the plan, Noah listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. Then, to my surprise, he began suggesting strategies of his own. There was something almost unsettling about how methodical he was, outlining each step with the precision of someone far beyond his years. His intelligence was undeniable, and in that moment, I realized just how much he had inherited from Sarah, not just her sharp mind, but her ability to think several moves ahead. But unlike her, he was using it to fix the mess she had left behind, not to manipulate or deceive. This wasn't just about stopping Sarah from draining us financially. It was about showing her that she couldn't just walk away and expect us to crumble in her absence. She had underestimated us, underestimated Noah, and that was her biggest mistake. 3 days later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just a faint hope that Sarah had finally decided to face what she had done. The moment I picked up, her voice came through the line, sharp and frantic. "Jacob, what did you do?" Her tone was unlike anything I had heard from her before. It wasn't cold, wasn't calculated. It was desperate. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone a little tighter. "Sarah," I said evenly. "Don't play games with me," she snapped. "The police are questioning me. Why is my account frozen? Why can't I access my money?" I almost laughed at the irony of it. The panic in her voice, the frustration. It was almost satisfying. "I assumed you had everything sorted out, Sarah. You've got your man and your $20,000 loan, don't you? Isn't this the freedom you wanted?" "This isn't funny," she hissed. "David is furious. He says I dragged him into a legal mess. His boss is interrogating him about the loan. What did you do?" I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the moment before I finally answered. "I didn't do much," I said calmly. "But our son? He might have outsmarted you." Her voice wavered. "Noah? What did Noah do?" "While you were off living your new life, Noah was cleaning up the mess you left behind," I explained. "He tracked your transactions, informed the bank about the fraudulent loan, and shut down the account before you could spend another dime." "He's just a kid," she stammered, her voice cracking. And he's 10 times smarter than you ever gave him credit for, I shot back. There was a long pause before she whispered, Jacob, you have to fix this. The police think I committed fraud. I exhaled a bitter laugh. Because you did, Sarah. You lied to secure a loan. You drained our savings. And now you're surprised there are consequences. I didn't plan for it to go this far, she admitted, her voice weak. It was just supposed to be a way to start over. I clenched my jaw. You abandoned your son and me. Left us in ruins. Is that what starting over looks like to you? She tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, in the smallest voice, she murmured, I'm sorry. For a second, I almost believed her. There was something raw in her tone, something that reminded me of the woman I used to know. But it wasn't enough. Your apology doesn't fix this, I said quietly. It doesn't erase what you did. If you really want to make things right, turn yourself in. Her silence said everything. She wasn't ready to give up her new life. What have you done, Jacob? She whispered. Nothing you didn't deserve, I replied. I hung up. Noah stood in the doorway, watching me. I met his gaze. She's not the mom you deserve. He smiled faintly. You did well, Dad, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope.